The ocean does not speak in words. It moves in whispers, slow, rhythmic, eternal. At twilight, when the sun surrenders to the horizon and the sky bleeds violet into indigo, the Pacific stretches endlessly, a mirror of fading light. Beneath that surface, where photons dissolve into shadow, lies a world we have forgotten, a world that forgot itself. Water is the great eraser. It softens stone, scatters bone, swallows cities whole. Yet it also preserves, trapping sediment, sealing coral, freezing time in layers of silt and sand. The ocean remembers what we cannot. It holds the echoes of voices that have not been heard in millennia. In the myths of the Pacific peoples, there are stories. Stories of islands that vanished, of lands that sank beneath fire and foam, of a motherland, vast and ancient, whose name has been whispered across generations in 100 different tongues. The Polynesians called it Hiva. The Maori spoke of Hawaii. The mystics of the 19th century named it Mu. Picture the ocean floor at night. No light penetrates here. The pressure is immense. And yet, scattered across the abyssal plains, there are formations, ridges, plateaus, structures that defy easy explanation. Some are natural. Some, perhaps, are not. The silence here is not empty. It is thick with absence. The absence of answers. The absence of proof. The absence of a world that may have once breathed above the waves. This is not a story of certainty. It is a story of what might have been, of what the water took and what it left behind. As the camera drifts over the darkening sea, we begin our descent, not into myth alone, but into the strange liminal space where memory and geology intersect, where the impossible becomes almost plausible, where the legend of Mu begins. The name Mu first surfaced not from ancient tablets, but from the pen of a French archaeologist with a flair for the dramatic. Augustus Le Plongeon, in the late 1800s, stood among the ruins of Uxmal in Mexico, tracing his fingers over Mayan glyphs. He believed he could read them, though scholars of his time and ours have found his translations wildly imaginative. According to Le Plongeon, the Maya had recorded the story of a vanished land in the Atlantic, a place they called Mu, a kingdom destroyed by volcanic fire, whose survivors fled east and west, seeding the civilizations of both the old world and the new. It was a romantic notion. And like all romantic notions born in the colonial imagination, it spread quickly. Le Plongeon's Mu was not alone. Around the same time, other thinkers were conjuring lost continents to explain the inconvenient facts of geography, biology, and culture. Why did lemurs exist in Madagascar and India, but nowhere in between? A sunken landmass, Lemuria, must have connected them. Why did ancient architecture appear so similar across distant shores? Perhaps a forgotten motherland had taught them all. Into this fertile landscape of Victorian mysticism stepped James Churchward, a British colonel and amateur archaeologist. Churchward claimed that during his time in India, he had been shown sacred tablets, written in a language no scholar recognized, by a high priest of an ancient order. These tablets, he said, told the true history of humanity. They spoke of Mu, not in the Atlantic, but in the Pacific, a vast continent stretching from Hawaii to Easter Island, home to 64 million people and the cradle of all civilization. According to Churchward, Mu had sunk 12,000 years ago in a single cataclysmic event, leaving only scattered islands and the myths of flood. Was any of it true? The tablets were never produced. The priest was never named. Scholars dismissed Churchward's claims as fantasy, a blend of theosophy, colonial nostalgia, and pseudoscience. Yet his books sold in the hundreds of thousands. They captured something deeper than fact, a longing, perhaps, for origins, for a time before division, for a golden age lost beneath the waves. The myth of Mu, whether rooted in reality or imagination, had awakened. And once awakened, it would not sleep. Long before humans walked upright, the Pacific Ocean was not as it is today. The planet itself was different, cooler, drier, with vast sheets of ice locking away the water. Sea levels were lower, coastlines stretched farther. What are now isolated islands were once peaks of continuous ridges, connected by land bridges and shallow seas. Imagine the Earth 20,000 years ago, at the height of the last glacial maxima. The ocean has receded. Australia and New Guinea are joined. Taiwan is part of the Asian mainland. The islands of Sundaland, Borneo, Java, Sumatra, form a single sprawling peninsula. And across the Pacific, the distances between islands are not as they appear on modern maps. They are shorter, closer, more traversable. This is the Pacific before time, before recorded history, before the flood of memory. Geologically, the Pacific is defined by fire. The Ring of Fire, a massive arc of volcanic and seismic activity, encircles the ocean like a wound that never heals. Tectonic plates collide here, the Pacific plate grinding against the Philippine, the North American, the Nazca. Mountains rise, islands are born, and just as quickly, they are swallowed again by the shifting crust. The ocean floor itself is a graveyard of forgotten landscapes. Beneath the waves lie vast plateaus, underwater mountain ranges, calderas of extinct volcanoes. Some are recent formations. Others are ancient beyond comprehension, remnants of a world that existed before the continents settled into their current dance. Could a landmass the size of Mu have existed here? Mainstream geology says no. The Pacific Plate is too young, too active, too unstable to have supported a continent. Continental crust is thick, buoyant, slow-moving. The Pacific floor is thin, dense, oceanic, born from mid-ocean ridges and destined to be subducted back into the mantle. There is no room for a lost continent. Not here, not in the way Churchward imagined. And yet, the question lingers. Because the Pacific before time was not the Pacific we know. The water was lower, the islands more numerous. And if not a continent, then perhaps something else. An archipelago, a network of land now drowned, a civilization that thrived on shores we can no longer see. The camera rises from the ocean, slow and weightless, until we are suspended above the waves. Below, the water darkens. And somewhere in that darkness, the past waits. Off the coast of Pohnpei, in the Federated States of Micronesia, there is a place that defies easy explanation. Nan Madol, a sprawling complex of artificial islets, built from massive basalt columns stacked like logs, crisscrossed by canals and corridors. The stones weigh several tons each. Some are 20 feet long. They were quarried from a site miles away, transported across open water, and assembled into a city that once housed priests, kings, and the sacred dead. No one knows exactly when Nan Madol was built. Estimates range from 1200 CE to much earlier. No one knows how the stones were moved. There is no evidence of wheels, pulleys, or cranes. Local legend speaks of magic, of stones that flew through the air. Archaeology speaks of ingenuity, of rafts and tides and human labor, but neither fully explains the ambition, the scale, the precision. Could Nan Madol be a remnant of something older? An echo of a lost tradition, passed down through generations and manifested here on this remote island as a final monument to forgotten knowledge? Thousands of miles to the southeast, on Easter Island, Rapa Nui, another enigma rises from the earth. The Moai, nearly 900 stone figures, carved from volcanic tuff, some weighing over 80 tons. They stand with their backs to the sea, gazing inland, their faces solemn and unreadable. The people who carved them, the Rapa Nui, left no written language, only the stones, and the stones say nothing, or do they? In the 19th century, when Europeans first encountered the Moai, they were baffled. How had a small, isolated population with limited resources created such monumental art? Theories multiplied. Some said the statues were the work of giants. Others suggested ancient visitors from distant lands. And when Churchward wrote of Mu, he pointed to Easter Island as proof, a lonely outpost of the drowned continent, its statues a memory of a greater civilization now lost. Modern archaeology has offered more grounded explanations. The Rapa Nui were skilled navigators, engineers, and artists. They used ropes, ramps, and clever leverage to move the moai. The island's ecology supported them, until it didn't. Deforestation, resource depletion, and social collapse followed. The statues fell. The culture fractured. The silence returned. But the questions remain. Why did the Rapa Nui carve their ancestors in stone? Why did they turn them away from the ocean? And why, across the Pacific, do we find similar impulses, megalithic construction, ancestral veneration, isolation, on islands separated by thousands of miles of open water? Were these cultures independent, each inventing similar solutions to similar problems? Or were they connected once by something we have not yet found? A shared origin, a common memory, a motherland that taught them all. The stones do not answer, but they stand, waiting. In the esoteric traditions of the late 19th century, lost continents were more than geological curiosities. They were spiritual necessities. Theosophy, a mystical movement founded by Helena Blavatsky, spoke of humanity's hidden history, of root races, of civilizations that rose and fell across epochs too ancient for conventional science to measure. Among them was Lemuria, a primordial landmass said to have existed in the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, or both, depending on the source. Lemuria's origins were humble. It began as a scientific hypothesis proposed by English zoologist Philip Sclater in 1864. Sclater noticed that lemur fossils appeared in Madagascar and India, but not in Africa or the Middle East. To explain this, he suggested a land bridge, Lemuria, that once connected the two regions before sinking into the sea. It was a reasonable theory, given the knowledge of the time, before plate tectonics, before continental drift. But Theosophy took Lemuria and transformed it. In Blavatsky's cosmology, Lemuria was not merely a land bridge. It was a vast continent, home to a race of ethereal beings, the third root race of humanity, who lived millions of years ago in a time before matter fully solidified. They were giants, she claimed, androgynous and psychically advanced, who eventually fell into physicality and perished. Their descendants migrated to Atlantis, and later to Mu. For Blavatsky's followers, Mu and Lemuria became intertwined, sometimes conflated, sometimes distinguished. Mu was the Pacific counterpart to Atlantis. Lemuria was its predecessor, older and more mystical. Hindu texts were cited, the Mahabharata, the Puranas, reinterpreted through an occult lens. Tamil scholars in South India claimed that ancient Dravidian civilization had originated on a lost landmass called Kumari Kandam, swallowed by the Indian Ocean millennia ago. The stories multiplied, layering myth upon myth. Yet beneath the mysticism, there was something genuine, a recognition that the world had changed, that coastlines had shifted, that the ocean held secrets. Cultures across the Pacific and Indian Oceans shared flood myths, migration legends, and tales of ancestral lands lost to the sea. Perhaps these were not fantasies. Perhaps they were memories, distorted by time but rooted in truth. In Polynesian oral tradition, there is Hawaii, a mythical homeland from which the ancestors voyaged. In Maori cosmology, it is Hawaii, the place of origin and the place of return after death. In Hawaiian chant, it is Kahiki, the distant shore. The names vary. The concept remains. An island, a continent, a paradise, lost. Whether we call it Mu, Lemuria, or Kumari Kandam, the archetype persists. A golden age, a primordial unity, a world before the fall. And while geology may not support a sunken Pacific continent, it does confirm that the ocean has risen. that coastlines have drowned, that entire landscapes have vanished beneath the waves. The echoes of Lemuria are not proof, but they are not silence either. They are the murmur of something half-remembered, carried forward through story, ritual, and dream. James Churchward was not content with mere speculation. He claimed evidence. In his books, published between 1926 and 1931, he described ancient tablets, stone, clay, or metal, depending on the account, inscribed with symbols he called the language of Mu. These tablets, he said, had been shown to him by a Hindu priest in India, a member of a secret order that preserved the lost history of humanity. The priest, whose name Churchward never revealed, had taught him to read the symbols. Over months, perhaps years, Churchward deciphered their meaning. They told a staggering story. Mu, according to the tablets, was a continent in the Pacific, larger than South America, divided into 3 great regions. It was ruled by priest-kings, its people organized into castes, its cities built with advanced knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and metaphysics. The Nakul, a priestly brotherhood, served as its spiritual and intellectual elite, traveling the world to teach the principles of Mu to primitive peoples in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Mu, Churchward claimed, was the true cradle of civilization. Egypt, Babylon, China, India, all had been colonies of Mu, seeded by the Nakul. The pyramids, the ziggurats, the megaliths, these were pale imitations of Mu's architectural glory. And then, 12,000 years ago, the continent was destroyed. A series of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes tore the land apart. The crust collapsed, the ocean rushed in. In a single day, Mu was gone. The tablets, Churchward insisted, were not alone. He claimed to have found corroborating evidence in Mexico, Tibet, and Egypt, inscriptions, artifacts, symbols that matched the language of the Nakul. He published photographs, diagrams, and translations. He lectured. He defended his claims against skeptics. And yet, no one has ever seen the tablets. No scholar has verified their existence. The symbols Churchward published bear no resemblance to any known script. Linguists have found them inconsistent, grammatically incoherent. Geologists have found his descriptions of Mu's destruction physically impossible. Historians have traced his sources to theosophical texts, colonial travelogues, and his own imagination. Churchward's Mu, it seems, was a creation, a synthesis of myth, misunderstanding, and a deep, almost desperate need to believe in a lost golden age. But here is the strange thing. His books shaped how millions of people imagined the ancient world. They influenced fiction, film, and popular culture. They inspired expeditions, both scientific and spiritual, and they tapped into something primal, the idea that we are not the first, that before us there were others, that the ocean knows more than we do. The Nakul may never have existed. The tablets may never have been real, but the story they told of a civilization erased, of knowledge lost, of a world that forgot itself, that story endures. Not as history, but as a mirror, reflecting our own fear that one day we too might sink beneath the waves. And all that will remain is a myth, whispered by those who come after. If Mu existed, geology should remember. Continents leave scars. They bend the crust, displace mantle, embed themselves in the fossil record. The theory of plate tectonics, established in the 1960s, maps the motion of Earth's surface with precision. Continents drift, oceans open and close, but they do so slowly, over hundreds of millions of years. And they leave evidence, thick granitic crust, ancient sediments, mountain roots buried beneath younger rock. The Pacific Plate shows none of this. It is young, geologically speaking, formed over the past 200 million years, as magma welled up from mid-ocean ridges and spread outward. Its crust is thin, basaltic, oceanic. It does not support continents. It consumes them. where the Pacific Plate meets continental crust, along the coasts of Asia, the Americas, and Oceania. It dives beneath, dragged down into subduction zones where it melts back into the mantle. This is not a place where continents are born. It is a place where they go to die. Mainstream geology is unequivocal. There is no room for Mu, not as Churchward imagined it, not as a vast, stable landmass supporting millions of people. The mechanics of plate tectonics do not allow it. The density of oceanic crust does not support it. The evidence does not exist, and yet the ocean is not uniform. Beneath the waves, there are anomalies, features that complicate the picture. Massive underwater plateaus, rising thousands of meters above the abyssal plain. Submerged ridges stretching for hundreds of miles. Volcanic islands that appear and disappear over geologic time. These are not continents, but they are not nothing either. The Antong Java Plateau, for instance, is one of the largest volcanic formations on Earth, roughly the size of Alaska, lying beneath the waters of the Western Pacific. It was formed by a massive eruption around 120 million years ago, when a superplume of molten rock punched through the crust and flooded the ocean floor with lava. Today, it sits submerged, its peaks shallow enough that in the past, during periods of lower sea levels, parts of it may have been exposed. Could such features have been mistaken for continents? Could ancient peoples navigating the Pacific during the Ice Age have encountered islands that no longer exist? The answer is possibly. Sea levels during the last glacial maximum were more than 120 meters lower than today. Coastlines extended farther. Island chains were longer. What are now coral atolls were once volcanic mountains. And while no true continent existed, the Pacific was more land-rich than it is now. More habitable, more navigable. The geological puzzle, then, is not whether Mu existed as a continent. It is whether something else existed, an archipelago, a network of now drowned islands, a maritime culture that thrived on shores we can no longer see. A culture that, when the ice melted and the seas rose, was erased, leaving only stories, only echoes, only the strange sense that something is missing. The ocean, after all, does not give up its secrets easily. And geology, for all its precision, can only tell us what remains, not what was lost. Beneath the Pacific, hidden from sight, lie formations that challenge our understanding of the ocean floor. These are not mythical structures, but geological facts, vast underwater plateaus, ridges, and microcontinents mapped by sonar and studied by marine geologists. They are remnants of a more complex past, when the Pacific was not merely a vast, empty basin, but a dynamic landscape of rising and sinking land. The Shatsky Rise, for example, is one of the largest volcanic plateaus on Earth. Located east of Japan, it covers an area roughly equivalent to California. Formed by massive volcanic eruptions around 145 million years ago, it now lies beneath 2,000 to 3,000 meters of water. Its peaks, once mountains, are now seamounts. Its valleys, now trenches. It is a drowned world, silent and dark, visited only by deep-sea submersibles and the slow drift of ocean currents. Farther south lies the Manihiki Plateau, a sprawling formation in the central Pacific, formed during the same period of intense volcanic activity. Like Shatsky, it is a remnant of ancient eruptions, now submerged and largely forgotten. And to the southwest, near New Zealand, is Zealandia, the closest thing Earth has to a modern, lost continent. Zealandia is not entirely submerged. New Zealand and New Caledonia rise above its surface, like the peaks of a mountain range whose foothills lie beneath the sea. But most of Zealandia, roughly 94% of it, is underwater. Geologists now recognize it as a distinct continental fragment, roughly half the size of Australia, that broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana around 85 million years ago. Over time, it sank, stretched thin by tectonic forces, until only its highest points remained above water. If Zealandia could sink, could other landmasses have done the same? The answer, geologically, is yes, but slowly. Continental crust does not vanish overnight. It subsides over millions of years, pulled down by the weight of sediment, the flexing of tectonic plates, the slow dance of isostasy. A continent like Zealandia does not drown in a day. It takes epochs. But volcanic islands, those are different. They rise fast and fall fast. The Hawaiian Islands, for example, are migrating. As the Pacific Plate moves northwest, the islands drift away from the volcanic hotspot that created them. Over time, they erode, subside, and sink. Millions of years from now, Hawaii will be a seamount, drowned beneath the waves. And new islands will rise where the hotspot burns through the crust again. This cycle, creation, erosion, subsidence, has repeated countless times across the Pacific. Many of the seamounts scattered across the ocean floor are the ghosts of islands that once stood above water. Some were tall enough to support ecosystems. Some may have been large enough to support human habitation. And during the Ice Age, when sea levels were lower, even more of these formations would have been exposed. Could these hidden plateaus be the geological foundation for the myth of Mu? Not as a continent, but as a network of islands, an Atlantis of the Pacific that existed not in legend, but in fact? The geology does not confirm Mu, but it does not dismiss it entirely either. It suggests a middle ground, a Pacific that was once more hospitable, more populated, more connected. A landscape that, when the ice melted and the seas rose, was gradually swallowed. And those who lived there, if anyone did, would have watched their world shrink, island by island, shore by shore, until all that remained were the highest peaks, and the memory of what came before. The camera descends again, slow and soundless, toward the Shatsky Rise. The water is black, the pressure immense, and somewhere in the sediment below, the bones of mountains sleep. Not all mysteries of the Pacific are continental in scale. Some are small, strange, and tantalizingly ambiguous. They surface in sonar scans, in diver reports, in the blurred photographs of underwater archaeologists. They are not proof of Mu, but they are questions. And questions, sometimes, are more valuable than answers. Off the coast of Yonaguni, the southernmost island of Japan, lies a submerged rock formation that has sparked decades of debate. Discovered in 1987 by a local diver, the Yonaguni Monument, as it has come to be known, is a series of massive stone terraces, right angles, and flat surfaces that descend in steps toward the ocean floor. Some see a pyramid. Others see a plaza, a temple, a staircase carved by human hands. Geologists, for the most part, are skeptical. The rock is sandstone, naturally prone to fracturing along parallel planes. Erosion, they argue, can create sharp edges, flat surfaces, and geometric patterns. The Yonaguni Monument may be entirely natural, a trick of geology magnified by human pattern seeking, but others point to details. Tool marks, allegedly, on certain surfaces. Circular holes that appear too regular to be erosion. Angles that seem intentionally carved. The site was above water during the last ice age, submerged only when sea levels rose around 10,000 years ago. If it is artificial, it would predate the pyramids, predate Sumeria, predate most of what we consider civilization. The debate continues. No consensus has emerged. The Yonaguni Monument remains suspended between nature and culture, geology and archaeology, fact and interpretation. Farther west, near the island of Pohnpei, there are reports of submerged ruins beyond Nan Madol. Walls, corridors, and foundations lying beneath the lagoon. Local legends speak of a city that once extended farther, swallowed when the land sank. Divers have photographed coral-covered stones arranged in patterns, but coral grows on anything. And patterns, like faces in clouds, can emerge from randomness. In the waters off Micronesia, near the islands of Palau, there are underwater structures that resemble terraces, platforms, and enclosures. Some are natural limestone formations, carved by water over millennia. Others are harder to explain. The ocean here is full of caves, sinkholes, and collapsed reefs, a submerged karst landscape that, during the Ice Age, would have been dry land. Did early humans live here? Did they build here? Or are we seeing only what we want to see? These microstories do not add up to proof. They are fragments, suggestions, possibilities, but they accumulate. And in their accumulation, they create a kind of narrative weight, a sense that the ocean is not empty, that beneath the waves there are layers of time, of erosion, of human ambition and natural process, all tangled together. One story alone can be dismissed, but dozens? Across thousands of miles? That is harder to ignore. Not as evidence of Mu, but as evidence of something. A human presence, perhaps, older and more widespread than we have acknowledged. A maritime culture that thrived on the edges of ice and water, building not on stable continents, but on the shifting thresholds of land and sea. And when the thresholds moved, when the ice melted and the oceans rose, they drowned, not in myth, but in fact. The camera lingers on the Yonaguni terraces, suspended in blue-green light. Fish drift past, coral clings to stone, and the angles, right or wrong, remain. Across the world, in cultures separated by oceans and millennia, there is a story. It is told in different languages, with different gods and different heroes, but the structure is always the same. The world was whole, the people were many, and then the waters came. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh records the story of Utnapishtim, who survived a divine flood by building a great boat. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah does the same. In Hindu tradition, Manu is warned by the god Vishnu, who appears as a fish and saves humanity and the sacred texts. In Greek myth, Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha survive a flood sent by Zeus to cleanse the earth of corruption. But the flood myth is not limited to the ancient Near East or the Mediterranean. It appears in Polynesia, where stories tell of the sea rising to swallow the land, leaving only the peaks of mountains as islands. It appears in Micronesia, where oral traditions speak of ancestors fleeing a great inundation. It appears among the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, where legends describe entire villages swept away by sudden, catastrophic waves. Are these myths the same event, remembered differently? Or are they parallel responses to parallel experiences? Modern geology offers a clue. At the end of the last glacial maximum, around 20,000 years ago, the planet began to warm. The ice sheets that covered much of the northern hemisphere started to melt, slowly at first, then faster. Meltwater flowed into the oceans. Sea levels rose, not steadily, but in pulses, periods of rapid increase followed by slower intervals. Between 15,000 and 7,000 years ago, global sea levels rose by more than 120 meters. Coastlines retreated, river valleys flooded, entire ecosystems were drowned, and humans who had lived for thousands of years on those coasts would have witnessed the transformation, not in a single day, but across lifetimes. Generation after generation, watching the water creep higher, villages abandoned, hunting grounds submerged, sacred places lost. This was not a mythological flood. It was a real one, slow by human perception, but catastrophic over centuries. And those who experienced it would have passed the memory forward. Through story, through ritual, through the warning encoded in myth, the waters can rise. The world can change. What was solid can become sea. In the Pacific, the effect was especially pronounced. Islands shrank. Atolls formed. Low-lying coastal plains, the richest, most habitable land, disappeared beneath the waves. If there was a maritime culture thriving on these shores during the Ice Age, it would have been devastated, not by a single flood, but by a slow, relentless drowning, a migration forced by rising tides. Could this be the origin of the Mu legend? Not a continent, but a network of Ice Age settlements, now submerged, whose people fled to higher ground and carried with them the memory of a lost homeland. The flood myths say yes. Geology says it is possible. Archaeology, limited by the difficulty of exploring underwater sites, remains cautiously open. And the ocean, which holds the evidence, keeps its silence. But the memory persists. In every culture that lives near water, there is a story of when the water rose, of when the world changed, of when the ancestors had to leave. And whether we call it Noah's flood, the deluge of Manu, or the sinking of Mu, the pattern is the same. The sea remembers, even if we do not. The end of the Ice Age was not gentle. It did not arrive as a slow thaw, a gradual warming, a smooth transition from cold to temperate. It came in fits and starts, punctuated by sudden shifts, dramatic reversals, and events so abrupt they seem almost impossible. One of the most dramatic was the Younger Dryas, a period of rapid cooling that interrupted the warming trend around 12,900 years ago. For more than 1,000 years, the northern hemisphere plunged back into near glacial conditions. Temperatures dropped, ice sheets re-advanced, forests died, and then, just as suddenly, around 11,700 years ago, the cold snapped. Within decades, perhaps even years, the climate warmed again. The ice retreated, the glaciers collapsed, and meltwater, locked in ice for millennia, poured into the oceans. The cause of the Younger Dryas is still debated. Some scientists point to a disruption in ocean currents caused by a massive influx of fresh water from melting ice. Others suggest a cosmic impact, a comet or meteor airburst that scattered debris across the northern hemisphere, igniting wildfires and triggering a temporary ice age. The evidence is inconclusive, but the consequences are not. During this period, sea levels rose rapidly, coastlines shifted, river deltas flooded, and anyone living near the water would have experienced catastrophe. Not mythological, but real. Not gradual, but sudden. In the Pacific, the effects would have been dramatic. Islands that had been stable for thousands of years began to shrink. Coral reefs once exposed were submerged. Lagoons expanded. Coastal plains vanished. And if there were communities living on these shores, communities that had thrived during the stable climate of the Ice Age, they would have been displaced, forced to migrate, to adapt, or to perish. This is not speculation. We know that sea levels rose. We know that coastlines changed. We know that ecosystems collapsed. And we know that humans were there, because we have found their tools, their middens, their fire pits, preserved in caves, buried in sediment, or submerged beneath the modern ocean. What we do not know is how organized these people were, whether they built structures, whether they had art, language, ritual, whether they were isolated tribes or connected networks, because the places they lived are now underwater. And underwater archaeology is expensive, difficult, and often impossible. But the climate tells us one thing with certainty. The world they knew ended, not in a day, but in a century. And for those who survived, the memory of that ending would have been profound. A world-shattering event passed down through generations, embedded in myth and story. Could the legend of Mu be a memory of the Younger Dryas? Of the rapid sea level rise that followed? Of islands that vanished, cultures that drowned, and a homeland that was lost? It is possible. And perhaps, more importantly, it is human, because this is what we do. We take the unbearable, the loss of home, the death of a world, and we transform it into story, into myth, into meaning. We say, once there was a land, and it was beautiful, and it was lost, and we are what remains. The camera rises from the ocean, slow and reverent, until the water becomes sky. The sun breaks through clouds, and somewhere below, the drowned world waits. Long before Europeans arrived in the Pacific, long before Churchward or Le Plongeon wrote their books, the people of Oceania carried their own stories. Stories of origin, stories of migration, stories of islands that no longer exist. The Polynesians speak of Hawaii, a sacred homeland from which their ancestors voyaged. In Maori tradition, it is the place of the dead where the spirits return after death. In Hawaiian chant, it is Kahiki, a distant land across the horizon. In Tahitian cosmology, it is Hawaii, the cradle of the gods. The name shifts, but the concept remains. There was a place before this place, an origin, a source. Some scholars interpret Hawaii as a metaphor, a spiritual concept rather than a physical location. Others suggest it was a real island, perhaps in the Western Pacific, from which successive waves of migration began. But oral tradition does not always distinguish between geography and myth. The two are woven together. A place can be both real and sacred. A memory can be both historical and symbolic. In Micronesia, there are similar stories. On Pohnpei, the people tell of Kanemweso, a sacred eel who helped the first settlers navigate to the island. The ancestors, they say, came from the west, from lands that were larger, more powerful, more ancient. Nan Madol itself is said to have been built by twin sorcerers, Olisipa and Olasipa, who used magic to lift the massive stones into place. But beneath the magic, there is a memory. The builders came from elsewhere. They brought knowledge. And when their work was done, they vanished. On Easter Island, the oral traditions speak of Hiva, a land to the west, from which the first king, Hatu Matua, sailed with his people. They arrived at Rapa Nui and carved the moai, replicating, perhaps, the sacred images of the homeland they had left behind. Whether Hiva was a real place or a mythic origin, the story establishes continuity. We came from somewhere. We remember. Across vast distances, separated by thousands of miles of ocean, Polynesian and Micronesian cultures share a common theme: migration from a Western homeland. Could these stories be a cultural memory of the Ice Age Pacific? Of a time when islands were more numerous, more connected, and more habitable? When the sea was lower and the distances shorter? When there were, perhaps, communities thriving on shores that no longer exist? Oral tradition is not history in the modern sense. It is fluid, adaptive, shaped by the needs of the present as much as the facts of the past. But it is not fiction either. It is memory, encoded in ritual and narrative, passed down across generations. And when multiple cultures, across vast distances, tell similar stories, it suggests a common root, a shared experience, a truth, however distorted, at the core. The people of the Pacific remembered. They remembered migration. They remembered loss. They remembered a homeland that was no longer there. And whether that homeland was a single island, a network of islands, or a metaphor for the world before the flood, the memory endured. Because memory is how we survive. It is how we know who we are. And even when the land is gone, even when the shores have drowned, even when the world has changed beyond recognition, the story remains, carried forward in the voices of those who refuse to forget. Language is a map. It traces migrations, records contact, and preserves the echoes of cultures long vanished. In the Pacific, the distribution of languages offers clues to ancient movements, pathways carved not in stone, but in sound. The Austronesian language family is one of the largest and most widespread in the world. It stretches from Madagascar in the west to Easter Island in the east, from Taiwan in the north to New Zealand in the south. They share common roots, cognates, grammatical structures, phonetic patterns that point to a common origin. Linguists have traced this origin to Taiwan around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. From there, Austronesian-speaking peoples migrated south into the Philippines, Indonesia, and Melanesia. Around 3,500 years ago, they pushed farther east into the Pacific, becoming the ancestors of the Polynesians and Micronesians. This migration, one of the great human journeys, was enabled by sophisticated navigation, reading the stars, the swells, the flight patterns of birds. They carried with them not only language, but also crops, animals, and technology. The outrigger canoe, the double-hulled voyaging vessel, the knowledge of open ocean sailing. But here is the question: why did they leave? One theory suggests population pressure. As communities grew, resources became scarce, and people sought new lands. Another theory points to climate change, droughts, shifting monsoons, rising seas that made certain regions less habitable. A third suggests cultural factors, a tradition of exploration, a drive to see what lay beyond the horizon. Or perhaps it was memory. A memory passed down through generations of a time when the ocean was different, when islands were more numerous, when the world was larger. And the urge to migrate was not a search for something new, but a search for something lost. The linguistic evidence does not prove mu, but it does reveal a pattern of deep antiquity, of connections that predate recorded history. Some linguists have noted intriguing similarities between Austronesian and other language families. Thai Kagai in mainland Southeast Asia, Austroasiatic in Vietnam and Cambodia, even distant echoes in the indigenous languages of South America. These similarities are controversial, contested, and far from proven, but they raise the possibility of even older connections, of a proto-language spoken before the dispersal of the Austronesians, before the flooding of the coasts, before the world changed. Language, like memory, is a survivor. It adapts, evolves, fragments, but it retains traces of its origins. And in the Pacific, where oral tradition is strong and written records scarce, language is one of the few tools we have to reconstruct the past. The words for ocean, canoe, ancestor, island, these are not random. They are inherited, passed down, shaped by the experiences of those who spoke them first. And if we listen closely, we might hear, beneath the modern languages, an older voice. A voice that remembers when the ocean was different, when the islands were closer, when the world was not yet drowned. The camera drifts over a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe, its double hull cutting through the water, its sail taut against the wind. The crew chants, a navigation song passed down through generations, encoded with the names of stars, the angles of swells, the knowledge of where to go when the land is no longer visible, the language of the waves, the memory of the journey, the echo of a world we can no longer see. To stand before non-metal is to confront a question that has no easy answer. How? The stones are basalt. Massive, hexagonal columns formed when lava cooled and cracked into geometric shapes. They were quarried from a site on the island of Pohnpei, then transported, somehow, across water and assembled into artificial islets. The largest stones weigh 50 tons. Some are 20 feet long. They were stacked without mortar, fitted together with precision, creating walls that have endured for centuries despite typhoons, earthquakes, and the relentless erosion of salt water. No cranes, no wheels, no metal tools. Just human ingenuity, labor, and time. Modern archaeologists have proposed methods. Rafts, perhaps, lashed together and floated at high tide. Leverage using logs as rollers. Ramps constructed from coral and earth to slide the stones into place. But these are reconstructions, guesses. No one knows for certain. And non-metal is not unique. Across the Pacific, there are megalithic sites that defy simple explanation. On Tonga, there is the Hamanga Amaui, a stone trilithon resembling a miniature Stonehenge composed of coral limestone blocks weighing over 40 tons each. On Easter Island, the Moai stand, carved from volcanic tuff, transported miles from the quarry to their platforms. On Rapa Nui, the largest Moai, El Gigante, weighs over 160 tons and was never finished, left lying in the quarry as if the sculptors simply walked away. These are not the works of a primitive people. They are the works of engineers, of planners, of cultures with deep knowledge of materials, physics, and labor organization. They understood weight distribution, leverage, and the properties of stone. They had social structures capable of mobilizing large workforces over long periods. They had vision, the ability to imagine a finished structure and work toward it over generations. And yet, we know almost nothing about them. Who were the builders of non-mantle? The oral traditions credit sorcerers. Archaeology credits the Saudeleur dynasty, a ruling lineage that controlled Pompeii from around 1200 to 1600 CE. But where did the Saudeleur come from? Who taught them to build? Were they inheritors of an older tradition, one that predated their arrival? The same questions apply to Easter Island. The Rapa Nui carved the Moai, yes. But why? What drove them to create hundreds of monumental statues on an isolated island with limited resources? Was it religion? Competition? Memory? Were they replicating something they had seen elsewhere? A sacred architecture from a homeland now lost? There are hints, faint, frustrating hints, of connections. The stone platforms of Easter Island, called Ahu, resemble the Maori of French Polynesia. The trilithons of Tonga echo the construction techniques of Nan Madol. The megalithic culture of the Pacific is not uniform, but it is not random either. There are patterns, shared techniques, common motifs. Could these cultures have been taught by a common source? A mother culture, now forgotten, that once spread knowledge across the Pacific? Or were they independent, each inventing similar solutions to the same problem? How to honor the ancestors. How to create permanence in a world of wood, coral, and thatch. How to carve memory into stone so that it would outlast the living. The answer, most likely, is both. Human ingenuity is universal, but so is transmission. Ideas travel, knowledge spreads. And in the Pacific, where navigation connected distant islands, where voyagers crossed thousands of miles of open ocean, where trade and kinship linked archipelagos into networks, it is entirely possible that architectural knowledge traveled too. The forgotten engineers of the Pacific did not leave written records. They left stones, and the stones, mute and massive, ask a question we cannot yet answer. Who taught you? And where did they learn? The camera lingers on a Moai, half buried in earth, its face weathered but still proud. The wind moves through the grass. The ocean whispers in the distance. And the statue, silent, waits. The ocean is not a void. It is a library. A vast, three-dimensional archive of Earth's history, written in water, sediment, and stone. Every layer of mud on the ocean floor records a chapter. Every coral skeleton encodes a year. Every isotope in a deep-sea core tells a story of temperature, salinity, and life. Marine geologists have been reading this archive for decades. They drill into the ocean floor, extracting cores of sediment that stretch back millions of years. Within those cores, they find microfossils, the shells of tiny plankton that once drifted in the sunlight, then sank to the bottom when they died. The chemistry of these shells reveals the temperature of the water in which they formed. The ratio of oxygen isotopes reveals whether the planet was in an ice age or a warm period. The layers of ash reveal volcanic eruptions. The layers of turbidites reveal tsunamis and earthquakes. The ocean remembers. It records. It preserves. And increasingly, we have the technology to read what it has written. In recent decades, Advances in sonar mapping have allowed scientists to create detailed images of the ocean floor. What was once a blank space on the map, vast, featureless, mysterious, is now visible in high resolution. Underwater mountains, trenches, plateaus, canyons, the mid-ocean ridges where new crust is born, the subduction zones where old crust is swallowed, the seamounts, thousands of them scattered like the ruins of a drowned world. Some of these seamounts were once islands. We know this because they have flat tops, eroded by waves when they stood above sea level. We know this because they have coral reefs, now submerged, that once grew in shallow water. We know this because the sediment around them contains shells of shallow water organisms, species that could not survive in the deep. These are called geos, and they are common in the Pacific. Hundreds of them dot the ocean floor, each one a ghost of an island that once was. Some sank due to subsidence, the slow settling of the crust. Others sank because sea levels rose. And during the Ice Age, when sea levels were lower, many of these geos would have been islands again. Visible, habitable, part of a landscape we have never seen. The ocean, then, is not merely a graveyard. It is a time capsule. And as we develop the technology to explore it, submersibles, remotely operated vehicles, autonomous drones, we are beginning to uncover what was lost. In the Mediterranean, underwater archaeologists have found shipwrecks, amphoras, and entire ports submerged by rising seas. Off the coast of India, they have discovered stone structures that may date back thousands of years. In the Black Sea, they have mapped ancient coastlines, now drowned, where early human settlements once thrived. Could the same be true in the Pacific? Could there be ruins, settlements, and artifacts lying beneath the waves, waiting to be discovered? The answer is almost certainly yes. The question is, where and how do we find them? The Pacific is vast, the ocean deep, and underwater exploration is expensive, time-consuming, and technologically demanding. But the archive is there, written in sediment, encoded in stone, waiting for us to learn how to read it. The camera descends, slow and deliberate, into the darkness of the ocean. The light fades, the pressure builds, and somewhere below, the archive waits, silent, patient, eternal. The Pacific does not sleep. Beneath its surface, the earth is restless. Tectonic plates grind against one another. Magma rises, the crust cracks, and the result is fire, volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis. These are not rare events in the Pacific. They are the rule. The Ring of Fire is the most seismically and volcanically active region on the planet. Nearly 90% of the world's earthquakes occur here. 3/4 of the world's active volcanoes rise along this arc. It is a landscape defined by destruction and by creation. For the people who live here, the earth is not stable. It is a living, breathing, sometimes vengeful force. And so they have stories. Stories of gods who dwell in the mountains, who shake the ground when angered, who spew fire when displeased. Stories of lands that sank beneath the waves, swallowed by the ocean in a single night of fire and ash. Are these stories myth, or are they memory? In 1883, the volcano Krakatoa, in the Sunda Strait between Java and Sumatra, erupted with a force equivalent to 200 megatons of TNT. The explosion was heard 3,000 miles away. The ash cloud rose 50 miles into the atmosphere. Tsunamis, generated by the collapse of the volcanic cone, killed more than 36,000 people. The island itself was destroyed, reduced to a fraction of its former size. The eruption altered global weather patterns for years, cooling the planet and creating vivid red sunsets that painters tried and failed to capture. This was not prehistory. This was recent, witnessed, documented, and yet even this event, so massive and so modern, has already begun to fade into legend among the local communities. The details shift, the numbers blur, the gods return. Now imagine an eruption 1,000 times older, or 10,000. Before writing, before cameras, before the scientific method, what would survive? Only story, only myth, only the memory that once the mountain exploded and the world ended. In 1452 CE, the volcano Kuei, in what is now Vanuatu, erupted with such violence that it may have been the most powerful volcanic event of the past millennium. The island was obliterated. The caldera collapsed. The sea rushed in. Ash filled the stratosphere, blocking sunlight and triggering a global cooling event. Across the world, crops failed. Famine spread. In Europe, the year 1453 was remembered as the year without summer. But the center of the catastrophe was here, in the Pacific, and for the people who lived nearby, the event would have been apocalyptic. Could this have been the source of a flood myth? A sinking land myth? A story of fire and destruction that, over centuries, became the legend of a drowned continent? The geology says it is possible. Volcanic eruptions can cause local sea level changes. They can trigger tsunamis. They can bury coastlines in ash and lava. And when the eruption is large enough, when the caldera collapses, when the island sinks, entire landscapes can vanish, not over millennia, but in days, in hours. The people who survived such events would carry the memory forward, and the memory, reshaped by time and telling, would become myth. A land that was, a land that sank, a paradise lost. The earthquake gods are not metaphors. They are geological forces, interpreted through the lens of human experience. And in the Pacific, where the earth is never still, where fire and water are locked in eternal combat, the stories of sinking lands are not fantasies. They are warnings, encoded in myth, passed down through generations, reminding us that the ground beneath our feet is not as solid as we think. The camera rises from the ocean toward the peak of a volcano, its summit glowing red against the night. Smoke rises, ash drifts, and somewhere below, the earth trembles. In the early 20th century, the search for lost civilizations became an obsession. Archaeology was young, romantic, and ambitious. Explorers dug into the sands of Egypt, the jungles of Central America, the mountains of Peru, and everywhere they went, they found ruins, cities buried, temples forgotten, cultures erased. If Troy could be real, if the Hittites could be real, if the cities of the Indus Valley could be real, why not Mu? Why not Atlantis? And so they searched. In the 1920s and 30s, adventurers and amateur archaeologists set out across the Pacific, looking for evidence of the drowned continent. They sailed to Easter Island, to the Marquesas, to the atolls of Micronesia. They dove into lagoons, scanning coral formations for signs of worked stone. They interviewed elders, collecting oral traditions and mapping sacred sites. They took photographs, made sketches, and published books filled with speculation, enthusiasm, and very little proof. Some were serious scholars. Others were mystics, driven by theosophical visions of lost root races and spiritual evolution. Some were opportunists, seeking fame and funding. And some were simply curious, compelled by the mystery, the romance, the idea that beneath the waves, something was waiting to be found. But the ocean did not cooperate. The Pacific is vast, deep, and unforgiving. Underwater exploration in that era was primitive. Diving equipment was crude. Sonar did not exist. Submarines were rare and expensive. And the ocean floor, for the most part, remained invisible. The search for Mu became a psychological journey as much as a physical one. It was a search for meaning, for origins, for proof that humanity was older, wiser, more connected than the textbooks suggested. And when the proof did not come, the myth adapted. Mu became spiritual rather than geographical, a lost golden age of the soul rather than the map. By mid-century, Mainstream science had moved on. Plate tectonics explained the structure of the ocean floor. Carbon dating revealed the true timelines of ancient civilizations. And the idea of a Pacific continent was dismissed as pseudoscience, a relic of an earlier, less rigorous age. But the search did not end. It simply went underground. In recent decades, a new generation of explorers has taken up the quest, not for Mu, exactly, but for the drowned landscapes of the Ice Age. Armed with modern technology, satellite imaging, LIDAR, multi-beam sonar, remotely operated submersibles, they are mapping the ocean floor in unprecedented detail. And they are finding things, not continents, but submerged coastlines, drowned river valleys, coral reefs that once grew at sea level, and in some cases, anomalies. Formations that look, at least at first glance, like they might be artificial. These discoveries do not prove Mu, but they do prove that the ocean is not empty, that the past is not fully known, and that the search, the human drive to uncover what has been lost, continues. Because the age of rediscovery is not over. It is just beginning. And as technology advances, as we develop the tools to see deeper, scan farther, and dive longer, the ocean's secrets are slowly, reluctantly being revealed. The camera drifts over a research vessel, its hull painted white, its deck crowded with equipment. Sonar screens glow in the bridge. Scientists huddle over data, pointing at patterns, debating interpretations. And far below, invisible but not absent, the ocean floor stretches on, waiting. There is a paradox at the heart of archaeology. The field demands rigor, evidence, and skepticism. And yet, again and again, it is myth that guides the shovel. Heinrich Schliemann found Troy by reading Homer. Arthur Evans uncovered the Minoan civilization by following legends of King Minos. The ancient city of Ober, the Atlantis of the sands, was discovered in Oman using satellite imagery and Bedouin oral tradition. Again and again, the so-called impossible has turned out to be real. So the question becomes, at what point do we take a myth seriously? Mainstream science has learned, often the hard way, not to dismiss oral tradition entirely. Indigenous knowledge, once ignored or ridiculed, is now recognized as a valuable source of information about climate, ecology, geography, and history. The Aboriginal Australians, for instance, have oral traditions that describe coastal flooding consistent with sea level rise over 10,000 years ago. The Klamath people of the Pacific Northwest have stories of a volcanic eruption that matches, with startling precision, the geological record of Mount Mazama's collapse 7,700 years ago. Memory, it seems, is longer than we thought. So what about Mu? Could there be a kernel of truth beneath the layers of mysticism, speculation, and fantasy? The honest answer is, we don't know. But we know more than we did. We know that sea levels rose dramatically at the end of the Ice Age. We know that coastlines drowned. We know that islands sank. We know that volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and tsunamis reshaped the Pacific landscape repeatedly over the past 20,000 years. And we know that humans were there, living on those coasts, navigating those waters, building on those shores. What we don't know is how organized they were, how widespread, how advanced, because the places they lived are now underwater. And we have only just begun to look. The science of the impossible is not about believing in myths. It is about recognizing that myths sometimes contain information, that stories are not random, that oral tradition, however distorted by time, can preserve details that written records cannot, and that the absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. In the case of Mu, the evidence is not there yet, but the absence of evidence is not proof it never existed. It is proof, simply, that we have not looked hard enough, or in the right places, or with the right tools. The ocean floor is the least explored environment on Earth. And as technology improves, as sonar resolution increases, as submersibles go deeper, as autonomous drones scan wider, we are finding new things, old things, unexpected things. We have found underwater caves with Ice Age art, submerged forests perfectly preserved, ancient shorelines now 100 meters below the surface. And yes, we have found structures or formations that look like structures that defy easy explanation. Are these the ruins of Mu? Almost certainly not, but they are the ruins of something. And that something is a version of the past we have not yet fully imagined. The science of the impossible, then, is not about proving myths true. It is about staying open, staying curious, and recognizing that the world we think we know is only the world we have seen so far. There is more, beneath the waves, beneath the sediment, beneath the layers of time and forgetting. And one day, perhaps, we will find it. The camera holds on a sonar image, grayscale, pixelated, ambiguous. Is it a rock, a reef, or something carved by human hands? The scientists argue the data is inconclusive, and the ocean, patient as always, keeps its secrets. Perhaps Mu was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was never meant to be a place at all. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, wrote about archetypes, universal symbols that recur across cultures, embedded in what he called the collective unconscious. One of these archetypes is the Golden Age, the time before time, the paradise before the fall. In Christian tradition, it is Eden. In Greek myth, it is the age of Saturn. In Hindu cosmology, it is Satya Yuga, the age of truth. And in the myths of the Pacific, it is Mu, or Hawaii, or Hiva, the lost homeland, the place we came from, the place we can never return to. This archetype is not historical, it is psychological. It expresses a deep human longing for unity, for innocence, for a time when the world made sense, when we were whole, before language divided us, before conflict arose, before the waters came. In this sense, Mu is real, not as a geological fact, but as a spiritual truth. It is the memory of a state of being, encoded in myth and ritual, carried forward across generations, not because it happened, but because it means something. Theosophy understood this. The mystics of the early 20th century were not primarily interested in archaeology. They were interested in evolution, not biological, but spiritual. They saw Mu, Lemuria, and Atlantis as stages in humanity's journey. Lost civilizations represented lost states of consciousness, golden ages we had to reclaim through spiritual practice, meditation, and moral development. For them, the search for Mu was inward. It was not about finding ruins in the ocean. It was about finding the ruins within, the fragments of ancient wisdom buried beneath the noise of modern life. And in a way, they were onto something. Because the longing for Mu, the sense that we have lost something precious, something essential, is universal. It appears in every culture, every generation. It is the feeling that the world was once better, that we were once more connected, that there was a time before machines, before cities, before the fracturing of community and the isolation of the self. Whether that time ever existed is almost beside the point. The longing itself is real, and the myth of Mu gives shape to that longing. It says, yes, there was a golden age, and yes, it was lost, but the memory remains. And perhaps, if we remember hard enough, we can find our way back. This is the power of myth. Not to record history, but to encode meaning, to give form to the formless, to transform loss into story, and story into hope. Mu, then, is not a place. It is a mirror, a reflection of our deepest fears and our deepest desires. The fear that everything we build will one day be swept away. The desire to believe that before us there was something greater, something wiser, something we have forgotten, but might one day remember. And in that sense, Mu exists. Not beneath the waves, but within us. A continent of the soul. A homeland we carry wherever we go. The camera rises, slow and infinite, until the ocean is just a blue curve against the black of space. The earth turns, the waves move. And somewhere, in the hearts of those who look at the horizon and wonder, Mu lives. Water is time made liquid. Every molecule has a history. Some have been vapor in the stratosphere. Some have been ice in glaciers. Some have been rain on ancient forests, or mist on mountains that no longer exist. Water circulates endlessly through the hydrosphere, from ocean to cloud, cloud to rain, rain to river, river back to ocean. It is recycled, reused, eternal. The ocean holds all of this. Every drop of water that falls into the sea becomes part of a vast, swirling archive. It mixes, disperses, but never disappears. And within that water are traces, isotopes, minerals, dissolved salts. Each one a clue to where the water has been, what it has touched, what it has witnessed. Scientists can read these traces. By analyzing the oxygen isotopes in ancient ice cores, they can reconstruct past climates. By studying the salinity of deep ocean currents, they can map the circulation of water over centuries. By examining the chemistry of coral skeletons, they can determine the temperature of the ocean in which the coral grew. The ocean remembers, not in the way humans remember, with stories and images and emotion, but in a more fundamental way. It records, it preserves, it encodes the past in its very substance. And this is where the metaphor of Mu becomes something more than metaphor. Because if there was a civilization, a culture, a people who lived on shores now drowned, their presence would still be there. In the sediment, in the coral, in the isotopes. We have found evidence of human activity in underwater caves, tools, bones, charcoal from fires. We have found submerged hearths, shell middens, and stone alignments. These are not myths. They are facts. Proof that humans lived, worked, and built in places that are now beneath the sea. And as we continue to explore, we will find more. Not because Mu was real, but because the ocean was once different. The coastlines were farther out, the islands more numerous, the world more habitable. And the people who lived there left traces. Not monuments, perhaps, not cities, but traces, fragments, echoes. The memory of water is patient. It does not insist. It does not argue. It simply holds quietly the record of everything it has touched. And when we are ready, when we have the tools, the time, the will, it will show us. Because the ocean is not a void. It is a history, written in currents, encoded in salt, preserved in the slow drift of sediment and the patient growth of coral. And somewhere in that history, buried beneath layers of time and tide, there may be a truth. Not the truth of Mu, as Churchward imagined it, but a truth nonetheless. The truth that we are not the first, that others came before, that they built and lived and loved and lost, and that the ocean, which took them, still remembers. The camera lingers on a single drop of water, magnified, refracting light into a spectrum of color. It falls, it merges with the ocean, and in that merging, it becomes part of everything. Past, present, future, all flowing together, all one. Dawn breaks over the Pacific. The sun rises slow, pulling light from the horizon, turning the water from black to silver to blue. The waves roll, steady and eternal, each one a breath of the planet. The camera drifts low over the surface, watching the light fracture and dance. This is the last shore, not in space, but in time. The edge of memory, the boundary where history dissolves into myth, and myth into silence. Somewhere beneath these waves, there may have been islands, there may have been people, there may have been cities, carved from stone, whose walls have long since crumbled into sand. Or there may have been nothing, just the wild, untamed ocean, the same as it is now, empty, indifferent, eternal. We will never know for certain. The evidence is too sparse, the ocean too deep, the past too distant. But the uncertainty is not a failure. It is an invitation, because the story of Mu is not really about Mu. It is about us, about our need to believe that we are part of something larger, that our lives, however brief, are connected to a longer story, that we are not the first, and we will not be the last, that before us there were others who stood on shores, looked out at the horizon, and wondered what lay beyond. And after us, there will be others who will look back at our cities, our monuments, our digital archives, and wonder, who were they? What did they believe? What did they leave behind? The legend of Mu reminds us that everything is temporary, that empires rise and fall, that coastlines shift, that the ocean, patient and powerful, outlasts us all. And yet, despite this, or perhaps because of it, we build, we carve, we remember. We tell stories, because stories are how we fight against forgetting. They are how we leave ripples in time. Whether Mu existed or not is, in the end, less important than the fact that we still ask the question, that we still search, that we still stand at the edge of the water and imagine what might be hidden beneath. Because the ocean is not just a physical space, it is a canvas for our imagination, a mirror for our fears, a vessel for our hopes. And as long as there are shores, and as long as there are people standing on them, looking out at the waves, wondering, there will be myths, there will be legends, there will be lost worlds, drowned continents, and golden ages that never were, but might have been. The sun climbs higher, the water gleams, and the camera rises, slow and reverent, until the ocean is just a curve of blue against the black of space. The earth turns, the waves move, and somewhere, deep below, the last shore waits, silent, patient, forever.